So findability is a discipline that has three main goals: to help people find your website, help people find the content inside of your website, and then help them rediscover it later on. And from a user's perspective, that's a great thing, because we've all had an experience where we're looking for a very specific piece of content, specific answer, and it can be frustrating when you can't find what you're looking for.
Okay.
So if people that are building websites consider findability along the way through each step of that project, they can help their audience better discover that content. When we make connections in the physical world with people, that's either a hello and a brief conversation, or it can turn into a lasting relationship. And ultimately what we're trying to do when we build websites is we're trying to create lasting relationships with people. So if you use certain technologies like microformats, it's a way to basically say that this content is not just text, it's a resume, or it's contact information, an address. That content can then become portable. And when people when they lose things, the way that they solve it in the real world, you lose your keys, you put a hook next to the door so you can rediscover those keys when you leave the house. Same thing happens on the web, that making content portable so people can move it from the information on a web page into their address book makes that rediscoverable so they can find you again. So I don't see the scale of the web being negative at all. That's a fantastic thing. It means we have a lot more things to explore and a lot more people to connect with. But certainly, I mean, when you've got more participants, in fact, Netcraft stats of the end of 2008, there were 186 million-ish websites. And so when you're one website in 186 million, that's a bit like winning the lottery when you're trying to connect with your audience. So as we have more noise, you need to amplify the signal and make that signal clearer. So that's what Findability is trying to do.
Okay.
So one easy way is to build your website, when you write the code, the HTML for the page, that you use semantic markup that adequately describes the information hierarchy of your message. And so web standards that are created by the W3C tell us how we should use certain HTML tags and elements to describe content, to say that this is strongly emphasized, or this is a heading, it's the number one heading on the page to describe what's most important about this page. So using web standards is, it's not a silver bullet by any means in terms of getting really high search engine rankings, but it helps greatly overcome some of the pitfalls. It's pretty close to a monopoly. I mean, it certainly has the lion's share of the market of search, and it's doing a lot of great things free of charge. It's a company that has done great things for the web. But at the same time, it is a little bit scary to have so much content and so much of our activity on the web in the hands of one organization that, should something change in the organization, that they have a lot of power. I don't necessarily think that that's going to happen, but there are challengers out there. There's Bing just came out from Microsoft, which is taking a kind of a different approach to search. And search is not the only way that people discover content on the web. I mean, certainly we use Google a lot every day, and it's a fantastic tool. But people discover content from word of mouth, actually. Someone emails them, a tell a friend feature on a website, through social networks. So there are lots of different ways that people discover content. I mean, that sort of thing is pretty hard to predict. I mean, there have been lots of challengers that are alleged Google slayers that are, there was Wolfram Alpha, which the media portrayed them as the Google slayer, but they portrayed themselves as something different. And it would be a good thing to have more competition for Google. And certainly Microsoft and Google, they seem to have a lot of competing interests. And I see that as a good thing. Much like with the browser wars in the late 90s, we had just antiquated browsers rendering things in different ways, and they fought back and forth. But out of that came new ideas, new innovations, and new standards. So they need some competition to bring that forward. There are some things that could be legislated and that would be universally accepted. So child pornography, I think that all governments could get together and say, let's work together to stop this. But there are other issues like intellectual property. I know that there have been some companies and organizations that have said, we'd like to have control of this particular aspect of the web, or we only want this type of communication. Like for instance in China, that they have these extreme filters that basically limit content access. And essentially what happens is many Chinese citizens can just find ways around those blocks. I mean, in terms of legislating and controlling the web, it's very nebulous. It's just so broad, and if any country said, we're going to cordon off our piece and make it ours, and still be part of the World Wide Web, if it's their own closed network, you can control that. But when it's part of the World Wide Web, people will just set up roads that go around you, and everyone else will be part of the conversation and you won't. People have a political power, and when people have the ability to communicate broadly, that just amplifies their political power. And I think Aarron's just a fantastic example of how trying to block off and shut down one piece of the web is, it's just impossible. That Twitter basically became the news stream out of Iran, and we got a lot of information firsthand about what's going on that would have otherwise 5 years ago we would not have known that. I mean, that does happen to a certain degree, and for the record, I don't think that most things on the web, the web is open, and it was very generously given to us by Tim Berners-Lee. He could have locked this down, and he could have created intellectual property around this, but he didn't, and that let it grow into what it is. It needs to remain open to be what it can be. They do. So they do, and a perfect example would be bloggers. There are a lot of bloggers that sort of maybe don't check facts and publish information that's not correct, but then there are other bloggers that then comment back, and because there are trackbacks where you can write something on your blog that automatically posts as a comment on someone else's blog, the checks and balances are built in. Same with Wikipedia, that you've got crowdsourcing, that people can work together and check facts. I don't worry about it from like an e-commerce perspective. It's actually safer to go make a purchase on Amazon than it is to give your waiter at your local restaurant your credit card. In terms of Facebook and other social media information, personal information, I'm not terribly worried about it. It does pose some problems, especially like keeping separate your professional and your personal life. It forces us to kind of consider how we see ourselves and what we see as acceptable. In my mind, I hope that we kind of just make a shift to accepting the humanity, that we're not all perfect and professional all the time, that there can be some social aspect or very intimate personal aspect to our professional lives as well. But we do need to, that's why something like LinkedIn works really great for having your professional relationships, and Facebook you can have different types of interactions there.